Hey, everybody. Welcome in. It is the post-game edition of the Utopia Football Podcast. Great to be with you. I am Sean Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610. Just got done doing the post-game show in the Texans studio here, the Hyundai Texans studio. Home games, I usually stick around here to do the podcast after we're done doing the post-game. 23-20 win over the Indianapolis Colts. That is the good news. 6-2 record. That is the great news. Tiebreaker over the Colts. That's really great news. And all kinds of different streaks and numbers we can come up with that illustrate that, at the very least, this is a flawed team that has a knack for winning close games. It's better than being a mediocre or bad team, I will say that. But there are still a lot of concerns with this team moving forward that we'll dig into in 4 winners and 4 losers on this game, the 23-20 win over the Indianapolis Colts. And I would say probably the big news that we're all waiting to see is what is the extent of Stefon Diggs' injury, a non-contact knee injury that he suffered in the second half of this football game, and didn't look good. It looked a lot like someone who tore an ACL. So we'll see if that's the case. And if that is the case, I would suspect even if that's not the case, he's probably not going to play on Thursday against the Jets. So they're going to go into this Jets game very shorthanded on offense. An offense that's already having trouble moving the football, lost yet another weapon. And I just hated to see that for Stefon Diggs. I've really grown to enjoy having him as a Houston Texan. So we'll wait and see. Maybe we're pleasantly surprised by all this. But I would say overall, again, good job getting the win. This was another win that felt like didn't need to be as close as it was. Texans gave up a big play offensively that was one of the touchdowns that the Colts scored in this game. One of the things that we stressed before the game that they could not do, they did. And yet they did enough to win the game. And I think we'll get into this in winners and losers, but the game was ultimately lost on the sequence right before the half. I don't know what happens in that end zone down at the south end of the stadium at the end of halves or the end of games, like it did at the end of the Buffalo game with Sean McDermott. And with Shane Steichen, where they just start making completely questionable decisions. But I'm glad it's happening. You know, it's good for the Texans. But, of course, Steichen's decision led to an interception by Jalen Petrie. And then on the very next play, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the very next play that Jalen Petrie, after the Jalen Petrie interception, that the Texans scored a touchdown. Yeah, one play, 7 yards. I'm looking at the drive chart right now. So we'll get into all that, but congratulations to the Texans. They've not been 6-2 very often in the history of their franchise. I believe I need to go check. This is, by my estimation, this is almost certainly their best start other than the 2012 season where they started out 11-1. So you're glad about that. My prediction before the season was 6-2 in the first 8 games. I thought they'd go 3-3 in the final 6 games. And now I think it's this. My feeling had always been the 3 primetime games in week 9, 10, and 11 are going to be what determines the season. So far, so good. They got the 6-2 that I was looking for in the first 8, and now we'll see what happens in these next 3. But for now, let's dig into today's win over the Indianapolis Colts. Again, a quick reminder to subscribe to the podcast, rate and review it. Really appreciate that. More and more of you doing that. The podcast numbers are good. Let's make them even better. Home team. We're all in this together, so I appreciate that. And a quick reminder, if you want to drop me an email, houmailbag@gmail.com. This is going to be a very busy week for the podcast because of the Thursday game. If I had to guess, I think the schedule will be definitely a mailbag on Tuesday. Did I say Thursday? Tuesday will be the mailbag. And then we'll have a preview episode for the Jets game that I will probably record on Wednesday, maybe drop Thursday morning, but it'll be sometime in time for you to get it before the game. And then I will record an episode on Friday, kind of summarizing things from the Jets game that you'll have for the weekend. So a busy week. It's including this one. It's a 4-episode week. And then I'm off to the Golden Nugget on Friday afternoon, and I'm shutting it down for 3 days. No Texans game on Sunday, no watch parties on Saturday. I'm going to the Nugget, and I'm going to sit in the sports book, and I'm going to drink my brains out. How's that sound? So if any of you are going to the Golden Nugget next weekend, keep an eye out for me. I'll be the bald guy that looks like Vic Mackey stumbling through the lobby crumpling up losing tickets, probably, if if history serves as any sort of guide. So that's the schedule for the week with the podcast. There will be a mailbag episode. So if you're listening to this right now and you want to send in an email, please do so. I'm sure you guys have tons of questions about this game, because I think there's still a lot of concerns left over from really the recent games, but specifically the Packers game and the pass protection. Whole lot more passing yards in this game and a lot more success. I think it helped being at home. But let's get into all that. Let's start with 4 winners and 4 losers. I'll bust through these quickly because I want to go home and eat dinner. I'm still at the stadium. I've been here since 8 in the morning. So let's get to our 4 winners on the game today. And I'll start with Will Anderson Jr. He was our guest on the post-game show today. If you guys have not seen Will Anderson's getup, he came in here. Dude has a black cowboy hat, shades, an unbelievable leather jacket on. He went and bought cowboy boots. Like, Will Anderson's drip was off the charts, which was really funny because in week 2, our first home game against the Bears, our guest was Danielle Hunter, and Danielle Hunter was still practically in his uniform when he showed up in here. I just think it's funny that those two have connected so much, the two of them. And in some ways, personality-wise, they couldn't be more opposite. Danielle Hunter is as quiet and scary as it gets. Will Anderson is scary, but he's one of the nicest human beings that I've ever met in my life. Anyways, so he's our guest on the post-game show. We'll have some of that audio on Payne and Pendergast on Monday. But it's great to see Will Anderson. And I'll throw Danielle Hunter in there, too, since they combined on the last play of the game to bury Anthony Richardson. I have no idea why Anthony Richardson didn't just throw up a prayer and try to get a pass interference or something. He swallowed that ball. But Will Anderson, we were watching right before our very eyes a guy turn into a complete beast and a menace for the other 31 teams in the league. Had another sack today. He's got 7.5 on the season, which is what he had all of last season. Led the team in tackles, so this wasn't something where he sacked the quarterback and he disappeared for the rest of the day. Will Anderson was all over the place. He is a bad man. He is a bad man in a good way. And it's just cool to watch his ascension before our very eyes. It's awesome to see a guy perform so well as a rookie, know that there's still a lot of meat on the bone, know how aware he is of the things he needs to do to make that next leap, and to see him making it is just so cool. So kudos to Will Anderson. The pass rush today was really, really good. 5 sacks for the Texans. I thought they did a good job. You know, there could have been even more, but Anthony Richardson is such a monster. He's such a beast. He's so huge that there was one play where he shed Foley Fatukasi. He shrugged off a 300+ pound defensive lineman. Now, if I'm a Colts fan, I don't like hearing that Anthony Richardson pulled himself from the game on one of the drives because he was tired. Have you ever seen a quarterback do the tapping the helmet thing? Like, I need a blow, coach. You're the quarterback. What the hell? Now, I will say this. It was a 3rd and 15, and Joe Flacco came into the game, and I was way more nervous about Joe Flacco doing something to damage the Texans than I was Anthony Richardson. So I'm not complaining about it. I just thought it was a little weird. So Will Anderson Jr. is number 4. Number 3 on 4 winners, 4 losers, C.J. Stroud. And I know statistically C.J. Stroud had a decent day throwing the football. It wasn't like a vintage Stroud day, 25 for 37. For 285 yards, which was obviously way better than last week. And he had the touchdown to Tank Dell right before the half. So if you looked at the box score, you'd probably say, yeah, you know, by Stroud standards, it was all right. It's all right. Not bad. However, if you watch this game, if you watch every snap of this game, you know that C.J. Stroud was pressured and running for his life again. There weren't as many like free runners coming at him as there were in the Packers game. There were still some. But, boy, the pocket collapsed quick on him so often that he was only sacked. Sorry, there's a mosquito or a gnat in the studio. If you're watching on the YouTube. The fact that he was only sacked twice in this game and didn't throw an interception is a major testament to me on his courage in the pocket, his ability to bail out when he needs to, his decision-making under pressure. I'll say this, like, I thought this was one of C.J. Stroud's more impressive games, and the numbers were not eye-popping. They were fine. I think he's going to get nailed with the turnover on the pitch play that Bobby Slowick called, which I have no idea why they're running a pitch out down there. So I think that wound up on Stroud's ticket. You know, they had to give it to somebody. I think it was just a bad play call. If we're going to blame it on a player, blame it on the guys who were getting destroyed on the right side of the offensive line. I think if I had to go back and watch, I think Robert Woods got matched up in a against a defensive lineman. I don't know. Bobby ain't doing it for me right now, and I wish he would, because I like Bobby Slowick a lot. But anyways, I thought this was one of CJ Stroud's more impressive games, considering how much he was under pressure. He's so tough, man. He is such a tough kid. And so he may not be putting up the gaudy numbers that he was at times last year. And there aren't those, wow, like stretch the field. Like we haven't seen, like Tank Dell in week 3 last year against Jacksonville closed the game with like a 60-yard touchdown. Nico Collins did the same thing a week later against the Steelers. CJ threw for 500 yards in week 9 against the Bucks. We haven't seen games like that yet from him. And yet he's still among the league leaders in passing yardage, even with an 86-yard stinker to his credit. He is the absolute truth at quarterback. So CJ Stroud, man, thumbs up. You're a tough dude. Appreciate you. Number 2 on 4 winners, 4 losers. Number 4, Will Anderson. Number 3, CJ Stroud. Number 2, I'm going to say the Texans secondary. Look, anytime a quarterback, even one with as janky a passing history as Anthony Richardson, goes 10 for 32 throwing the football, got to give the secondary the equivalent of a game ball, which is being mentioned on my podcast. That's my version of a game ball. Jalen Petrie had the pick right before the half. I thought that was great. Petrie had a couple other plays he'd probably like to have back, but I think overall Petrie's been a plus for this team this year, which is great to see because he was not last year. I'm glad to see him back and embracing the role that he's in. I think it's kind of reinvigorated him a little bit. Great job on the pick. That was a difference in the game. We'll get to the downside of that as far as losers go. Shane Steichen, you're coming up in a little bit. You made the list. I thought Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter did a really good job on the outside. It was great having Lassiter back. You know, they threw at him a little bit. It would have been interesting to see. Well, actually not interesting at all. I don't want to see. But if D'Angelo Ross had to play 100% of the snaps again, I don't know that they win this game. Eric Murray had a pretty good game at safety. He had 3 pass breakups in the first half of this game. So they did a great job, the secondary. The Colts overall had 140 yards passing when you take the sack yardage out of it, and half of that came on 1 pass to Josh Downs. So play to play, they were very, very good. Number 1 on the winners list, and this is an easy one, it's Joe Mixon. When Joe Mixon starts and finishes a game for the Houston Texans, he rushes for over 100 yards. That's a statistical fact. That's not conjecture. That's not me pushing fake news. It's a statistical fact. He has started and finished 4 games as a Texan, and he has rushed for over 100 yards in all of those games. He is clearly the best thing this offense has going for it consistently, and in big spots too. It's also very clear that DeMeco Ryans doesn't really trust any of the other running backs, even close to how much he trusts Mixon situationally. Mixon had 25 carries today, and then you had Dare with 1, Damian with 1, and that was it for the running backs. So it'll be interesting to see how Mixon's running style holds up over the course of a season. He runs with a very punishing running style. He's an older back. I say he's older. I think he's 27 maybe, but he's got a lot of mileage. So that's going to be interesting to see, something to monitor. As the punishment starts to stack up, does he still have that same juice in December and January that he has right now heading into November? But number 1 winner today, Joe Mixon, and to me, it's not even close. He is the Texans' MVP so far this season, in my opinion, even though he's only played 4 of the 8 or 4.5 of the 8 games. He is a difference maker. As far as losers go, this is not loser like the guy's a loser or he didn't play well. He actually played really well while he was in there. 5 catches, 81 yards. And this is loser with like maybe an asterisk next to it, or I reserve my right to withdraw this. But if this is the end of Stephon Diggs' season, I just hate it for him. I hate it for him. I hate it for the Texans. I think they can survive without Stephon Diggs. But I think we never really got to see what this looked like, if indeed he's going to be out for an extended period of time or even the season. If he's out for the season, then I think it's a fair question to ask, is this it? Was this the extent of the Stephon Diggs experience? And if so, was it worth it? Gave up a 2nd-round pick for him. So I think even with a lot of things, look, Diggs is, if he's out, Diggs will probably still be around the team. I think it's harder to lead from a position of injury than it is a position of activity. I think that's why Jimmy Ward is, that's why Jimmy Ward's not leading the hype group before the game because he's got a groin injury right now. Jimmy Ward's even said himself it's why he doesn't go up to guys in the locker room and kind of, get in their face or tell them, sternly what they need to do when he's injured. So I do think Diggs' personality in a positive way impacted that wide receiver room. So if they go on to do big things and Tank and Nico are a big part of that, I'm sure they'll attribute part of their success to Stephon Diggs. The end of the day, if indeed he's out, you got 8 games out of him, and he caught a bunch of balls but didn't really have major downfield impact for you, scored a few touchdowns, that kind of thing. So possession arrows probably pointed towards, I wouldn't do it over again, obviously, if you only knew you were going to get 8 games out of him for a second-round pick, and yet he's helped you out to a 6-2 start, and I think there is an impact in the building that he's had that's a positive impact since he's been here. So that's why I'm saying possession arrow pointed that way. I think even if Diggs is out for the season, that's still one of those things that we got to wait and see how the season plays out before we say that it was a failure or I wouldn't do it again. I get the value of a second-round pick. I understand that. But we'll see. Maybe we get better news than we're expecting. We'll keep an eye on the news wire for you. Hell, maybe it's come out now since I've recorded this. Certainly, by the time you're listening to this, maybe some news has trickled out about Stephon Diggs. So that's number 4. And I use it under losers, but not with the you suck today kind of thing. Not with you played poorly, that kind of thing. Just we're all losers in this thing if Diggs is out for the year. So we'll wait and see. Number 3, this is a you played poorly bullet point under the losers category. This is Kenyon Green. And I think Kenyon Green himself would say he played poorly. I mean, if you get replaced by Jared Patterson in the middle of a game, it ain't good. The offensive line as a position group, they've been mediocre at best this year, especially protecting Stroud lately. And so on an offensive line where there's a bunch of problems, Green is the biggest problem. He's also, at least until Jared Patterson got his bell rung, the most replaceable problem. So from that standpoint, I was glad to see the coaching staff say, look, enough is enough. You got to block somebody, man. Show some pride. You showed enough pride in coming back from these injuries to get yourself in shape and look like a real NFL offensive lineman. Now go play like one. You're a first-round pick. He's clearly swimming. I don't know if it's mental issues or whatever. He does not have health as an excuse anymore. He's healthy, Kenyon Green. So the one drive where they replace him is the drive that they go 70 yards for a touchdown. Joe Mixon runs in. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think Jared Patterson kind of buckled some things down on the left side. Now, Green played better in the second half, but it still ain't great. So this is the biggest problem. This is why even amidst the 6-2 start, we are harping on the protection because this is the one thing that can kill the Texans season is C.J. Stroud getting hurt. And at this rate, with as many hits as he's taking, he's going to get hurt. You got to fix it, man. And this isn't just for Kenyon Green. I'm talking all 5 of these guys. It was okay today at times. And Joe Mixon's getting 100 yards, not because you guys are plowing people. Joe Mixon's getting 100 yards because he's Joe Mixon. So don't come back at me with that. All right, number 2, Bobby Slowick's operation is a loser in this. Look, Slowick became a real hot candidate last year, largely on the back of C.J. Stroud's rapid ascension. And and Bobby Slowick had a part in that. There's no question. Bobby Slowick did a decent job last year. Not a great run game, obviously. I don't know that they were, between Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary and the kind of shift. They had a lot of turnover on the offensive line last year. That's the frustrating thing about this year. All 5 of these guys are healthy. They were a mash unit last year, and they actually did some good things. They're all healthy this year, and they're bottom half of the league at best, if not bottom third of the league. But back to Slowick, particularly in the second half of this game, the 2 opportunities in the Colts red zone where his play calling, I thought, was ratchet. It was terrible. First on the 3rd and 2 from the Colts 13-yard line, Texans up by a touchdown. You're moving the ball. John Mechie just made probably his biggest play as a Texan to get them down there. And then for some reason on 3rd and 2, he throws a missile screen to Mechie with Xavier Hutchinson being his only blocker out there, and the thing gets stuffed for a loss. I just don't know what gets into Slowick's head sometimes with how cute he gets with the play calling. Dude, it's 3rd and 2. Run Mixon. Let CJ do something. Dalton Schultz had a nice day to that point. those missile screens never work for you. You're calling a play that never works with two guys that hardly ever play. What are we doing? So they settle for a field goal. They go up 23-13. And then later in the game, they're up 23-20. And they're in goal to go. And he calls a toss to the right on second down that gets blown up right away. And I just don't get running a toss down there. I really I get wanting to rely on Mixon. But man, at that point in the game, you're running a play that has that many points of failure. This is the second game this year now where the Texans had a chance to score a touchdown to put a game away, and they fumble in the other team's red zone. Now, the other one was Cam Akers. He ain't here anymore. But this team has very little killer instinct. They've got incredible survival skills. So they would last a long time in the jungle. I just don't think they would go out and be able to kill the lion. You know what I mean? They would spend like a year or two running around the jungle waiting for the lion to die. The lion in this case is Anthony Richardson. So, and some of it is Slowick's play calling. So Bobby Slowick's operation, and on top of all the offensive line issues, which is Slowick's responsibility. They are not going to be able to get where they want to get to with the offense playing the way it is right now. They can still win the division. I think at best they're going on the road in the second round of the playoffs. Like they're last year's team right now with this level of offensive line play and play calling right now. They're last year's team, which is, 10-7, 11-6, win a divisional round game. Basically what at their best the Texans have been. We expected more. And they can get there, but they got to fix these things. Finally, last loser, I'll go Oppo here, Oppo sideline, Shane Steichen. Handed the game to the Texans in retrospect. Even with Slowick's play calling, nothing compared to the brain-dead sequence that Steichen had at the end of the half. Game tied at 10, exactly a minute left in the half. Colts take over on their own 5-yard line. So keep in mind, if you're throwing the football, you were expecting Anthony Richardson, who to that point was 2 for 13 throwing the football, to somehow work you downfield and get you in field goal range in under a minute. So they run the ball on first down with Jonathan Taylor, which is a smart, conservative thing to do. That's the correct thing to do. You get the ball to start the second half, be tied at 10, come out the second half. Texans are not a good second half team. You're in a great spot. So they run it on first down, and the clock's running. D'Amico Ryans has all 3 of his timeouts left. He's not using them. He seemed perfectly content to go into the locker room tied at 10 at that point. Right? The only reason the clock stopped was because Anthony Richardson on 2nd and 3, for some reason, they had him throw, and that pass was almost picked off by Kamari Lassiter. So you would think after that, when you'd be like, all right, let's get into the locker room. No, Shane Steichen has Anthony Richardson, the worst passer in football, drop back on 3rd and 3, and he throws a pick. 23 seconds left in the half. Where are you going? Where are you going to be able to move that football in 23 seconds? Nowhere with Anthony Richardson. Throws a pick. Next play, C.J. Stroud, touchdown, Tank Dell, and the Texans are up 17-10 at the half. I can only imagine the people that had Colts money line or Texans money line for the first half. That's where you want to be in a sports book, and that's where I'll be next weekend in a sports book. But Shane Steichen, you are number 1 loser, and we are thankful for it. All right, I got to get out of here. Appreciate all of you tuning into the podcast. Love these recaps. I'm sorry, I forgot to flip this over to 4 losers. I was still talking about winners. Man, it's late. There you go. There's 4 losers. Your 4 losers are Stephon Diggs if his knee is torn up. Who else did I have in there? Oh, Kenyon Green, Bobby Slowick's operation, and Shane Steichen, end of half brain farts. So there you go. All right. A reminder again, if you want to email the show, houmailbag@gmail.com. houmailbag@gmail.com. Hit the subscribe button, and we appreciate that. Tell a friend about the Utopia podcast. I will see all of you on Tuesday. I'll see all of you 6 a.m. Monday morning on Payne and Pendergast for a victory reaction Monday. And I'll see all of you on this podcast on Tuesday for the mailbag. Take care. Have a great night. Thank you, Texans, for winning this game today.